open this public information meeting for broadband expansion project. It's Thursday, August the 22nd at 10:35 in the morning. Please join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Dennis Ostick. I have the privilege of being the chairman of the town's Economic Development Connect Community Committee. And I now open the public information meeting for broadband expansion on August the 22nd, 2019. Please allow me a second to read the public information meeting notice. Notice of public information meeting. On Thursday, August 22, 2019 at 10:30 a.m. or thereabout, the Economic Development Connect Communities Committee of the Town of Boulder Junction will hold a public information meeting at the Boulder Junction Community Center, 5392 Park Street, Boulder, Fish Trap Room, Boulder Junction, Wisconsin. This meeting is open to the public and is to allow information to be presented regarding the expansion of affordable and high-speed internet in Boulder Junction Township, and to answer public questions and comments relating to this topic. The public is encouraged to attend and participate in the meeting. A quorum of town board members and other town committee members may be in attendance at this meeting for information gathering purposes only, and no town board or town committee action will be taken at this meeting. Thank you. The Economic Development Connect Communities Committee and its Broadband Workgroup have been engaged in meetings and discussions concerning the possible expansion of affordable broadband internet in our township. Thank you for joining us in this morning's presentation. Let me now ask Bill Nemeth, one of our workgroup members, to present to the audience. Thank you.
Thanks, Dennis.
You're welcome.
Okay, good morning.
Good morning.
Hey, a lively group. Always like that. All right. Well, thanks for giving up your part of your Thursday morning today. And we're here to talk about a potential broadband expansion project for the township of Boulder Junction. But before we get started, a question for you. See, this is an interactive session. So, how many of you are pleased with your current internet service? Raise your hand if you're pleased. So this is the second session we've had and nobody has raised their hand. So that should be a clue to us to say we got a problem and we need to fix it. Let's start out by first of all getting a common definition of what this broadband or high-speed internet is really all about. And I got to remember, I have a pointer today, so this is really good. So it's about data transfer. And anytime we see anything that's on a computer screen, that's data transfer. So I've got a list of some, but not all, of the things that require broadband or an internet connection. And some of those things, we know them are email, telephone calling, telemedicine, teleeducation, and we'll talk more about those in a moment. Thermostat monitoring, security systems, cameras, banking transactions, on and on and on. So today, you really can do almost anything. And in a few years, you probably won't have much of a choice. You will need to use the internet for those types of activities. So it's really anything that you can imagine is possible. You can and you will need to use the internet. It all takes this thing we call bandwidth. And simply stated, this bandwidth, if you can imagine water into a funnel, and that funnel is going into a hose. how much water can be put into that funnel and then that hose. Obviously, the bigger the hose or the pipe, the more water will flow through it. It's the same thing with the internet, except the water going through the pipe is this data, is this bandwidth. The more speed, and I'll talk about speed in a moment, the more speed you have, the more data and the more things you can do. Another comparison is electrical service. You can have 30 amp service for your home, which is, a few people probably have that today, or you can have 400 amps. That's the difference between what I'll call a 5 megabit service and a 1 gigabit service. So it's the same type of thing. How much speed do you really need? How many of you use the internet for email and web browsing? Should be just about everyone. Thank you. When it works. Uh-oh, there's another issue. We'll talk about that as well. How many of you stream, it's HD content. This is high definition content, videos if you use Netflix or YouTube TV or something like that. How many of you are doing that a little bit, about 50, a little bit less than 50%? This is an area that is absolutely taking off. And as you can see, if you're doing that, you need a minimum of 15 to 25 megabits per second of bandwidth. 1,000 megabits is 1 gigabyte. I'm sorry, gigabit. And we won't go into bits and bytes because that's like beyond where we need to go. All right, and then there's this next piece, streaming 4K content, which is really, really high resolution video and television, and playing games. And then the next one requires even higher levels of bandwidth, 200 plus megabits. Very large files. So people who are moving very large files around need to have that as a download. And then the next piece is, what's your upload speed? So let's move over here and let's talk about business requirements. Businesses require a little bit different type of internet connectivity than what most of us consumers require. So consumers of data, we take from this internet, this big cloud thing, and we pull it down to our homes. Businesses will do that, but guess what? They're also uploading that content, and in more and more cases, more content than they download. So businesses will always have what's called, or need, I should say, not have, but need, this symmetrical. And the example that I'm using here is they're getting 100 megabits of service down, and they also have 100 megabits service up. In 5 years, all of us will be doing that because so many things are going to what's referred to as the cloud. Businesses will also require speeds over 1 gigabit per second. So we're talking about a lot of speed requirements. Where's Boulder Junction here on this axis? Most of our service appears to be in that 10 megabit or less. There's a gap. We do have a gap. Types of internet. Internet can be delivered in a variety of ways. Listed here is, first off, it's optical, fiber optic cable. And that is demonstrated here. What fiber optic cable is, when you look at the cable itself, it looks like any other cable. It either has a black or an orange jacket. But what's inside makes a huge difference. These strands, these are strands of glass. So the technology works differently. It's shooting light through this glass. and you know how fast the speed of light travels. That is really the key to tell you that the speed of fiber optic is theoretically unlimited. In most circumstances today, speeds of 25 to 100 meg are common. The next one listed is fixed wireless, and that would be here. So there's a tower somewhere with an antenna on it, and that antenna is both transmitting and receiving signals. So that signal will go to a homeowner's home. Usually there's some type of panel antenna with a radio built in, either on a tower or on the house itself, to provide that connectivity. So there are essentially no wires for you. The speeds on that technology can be up to 1 gigabit, pretty good. In most cases, that doesn't happen. Real life speeds are anywhere between 12 and 25 meg. In some of the cities, you'll have higher speeds than that, but in most other areas, that's real life.
Is that line of sight?
It is line of sight with, you can get through a little bit of foliage, but it's primarily line of sight. Cable, we all know what that looks like. Delivered primarily by cable TV systems, and they did that to diversify their business. It's pretty good today, although it's copper. Speeds up to a gigabit, and then what we really see, and this is deployed in a lot of urban areas, we see speeds from 100 to 300. But this stuff, it is going away, and it's being replaced by fiber optic cable. Let's talk about DSL, and that is important, especially for the township of Boulder Junction. It's provided by telco companies. The primary telco provider in the township of Boulder Junction is CenturyLink. Copper lines. So here's an image of what CenturyLink currently employs. There is quite a bit of fiber in the township, and I'll show you some maps depicting that in a bit. But then what they use is they have their fiber, and it's notated by these markers, but then they have these white things that are powered called nodes. That takes the fiber signal, it converts it to signals over copper lines. And the copper lines are the old phone lines that go to your homes. So they're able to deliver the internet. About 100 meg is going to be the limit for copper in this type of situation. Speeds today, this is what we have in Boulder Junction, 1 to 40. Two other services I'll talk just a little bit about. Cellular. So you'll see a lot written about cellular. In this area we have 4G/LTE. That has speeds of up to 300 meg. We don't have that in this area. The next generation is 5G, and 5G can have absolutely blinding speed. You asked the question about line of sight. It has a very short distance, and it's probably not a solution in an area like this with our 120-foot pine trees and all of the foliage we have. It's really great for urban areas. Speeds today with 4G LTE are 10 to 40. And then there's satellite. So there are a couple of satellite providers. The benefits to satellite are, you can get it from any place where you've got a line of sight from the ground or wherever you mount the dish to the sky. Some of the downsides are the amount of latency. It just takes a long time getting that signal from your home up to the satellite, back down to Earth. You just imagine that takes quite a bit of time. So those are the types of ways we get internet today.
I have a question.
Yes, please.
I have a Verizon hotspot. Where would I be in that?
Yeah, so the question is, this lady has a Verizon hotspot. You would fall into the cellular area. And you're not alone, because in this area, the Verizon option seems to be like the second most common option.
Thank you.
A little backward here. Here's our agenda. I wanted to set it up and baseline everyone from an education standpoint. This can be a confusing space, and it's one of the reasons I'm not going to go into a lot of detail. That's about as technical as our conversation is going to get today. We're going to talk about governance a bit, and really concentrate on why we need to have this broadband service. I'll tell you a little bit about the objectives and the strategy that the work group and the committee has been working on for the last 6 months. Talk some about grants, and then it's really your turn. We need to understand what it is you need, what you like, what you don't like. So to give you a little bit of a guideline, I think on Tuesday night, we went just a little short of an hour and a half. Today would probably be about the same, maybe a little less. Here's the governance. In Boulder Junction, obviously, we have a town board, which is the elected body and the decision-making organization. Boulder Junction has commissioned the Economic Development and Connect Communities Committee. I'm getting pretty good at that. As part of the EDCCC, we have a Broadband Workgroup of Dennis Ostick, Steve Kuhn, and I'm Bill Nemeth. So it's good to be with you today. Why do we need high-speed broadband? You know, this is a question that some of you have probably raised, and we're going to answer that for you. The first area that really got us kicked off was the 2017 survey that the EDCCC sent to the residents of Boulder Junction back in 2017. And one of the significant questions and answers was, what do you see as Boulder Junction's economic challenges? The number one answer was the lack of broadband access. Second, and I know this is hard to see in back, aging population. Third was the workforce shortage, staffing. Fourth was the tourism, fluctuating tourism seasons, followed by housing, or the lack thereof. That's the premise what we're working off of, because today, and I'll show you a slide in a moment, today, if you don't have this, that's kind of the foundation. It's hard to build on that foundation in today's changing economy. It is changing. So telecommuting, I'm sorry for continuing.
That's okay.
It is changing. Telecommuting today is really the economy. I had a job where I traveled the majority of the time, so I've been telecommuting for probably 25 years. But over the last 10 years, companies have really encouraged and embraced their employees to be able to work wherever. Now, they've done that for several reasons. Number one, companies don't want to pay for office buildings anymore because they're expensive to own, they're expensive to lease, and they're expensive to maintain. They don't want to do it. Really, over the course of the last 3 or 4 years, companies have been just shutting office space down. Doesn't really provide any return on their investment when it comes right down to it. So, being able to connect, to talk, to video conference, you can literally work from anywhere. That's a real benefit for employees. Telehealth and teleeducation. We'll talk a little bit about telehealth now, and then Brent Jaliski with the school is going to come and speak a bit more and give you some firsthand information on teleeducation. Telehealth, we received a couple of presentations. It's amazing how that area is expanding and how it's going to impact every one of us in this room. Broadband's the key. You gotta have it to provide that fast, reliable, right? Reliable, and we'll talk about that point in a bit. Connection, you can work and do business anywhere. What does it do when you kind of roll out new economies? It can stabilize and diversify the economy, and that's specifically important to a community like Boulder Junction, where much of the economy relies upon tourism. And then finally, communities are really going to grab this opportunity or they're going to miss out. And we've seen, so Boulder Junction wouldn't be first. Just so you know that, I'm going to show you some information right now, but we can be the best at it, and that's really key. Continuing on why it's essential. It allows the town to market to young families, to entrepreneurs, to eco-friendly businesses, which really widen things. And what we're not talking about opening the place up to, 100,000 people. That's not the intent in any way, shape, or form. But to really create the next generation of economy for Boulder Junction. We get new folks here, and we've seen some of that already. It requires some new support businesses because we don't have health care here in Boulder Junction. Well, that's a potential opportunity for these new arrivals. Already talked about the stabilization and diversifying the economy. So Brent, I'm going to ask you to say a few words about how having broadband connectivity invests in our children's future. Brent Chaliski with North Lakin Elementary School.
Can everybody hear me? Yes. I have to keep my voice very low. The teacher voice coming out. Well, thank you for having me here, and it's very important to me, the students at North Lakeland and students coming into the area, that they have access to broadband, not only at the school, but also at their homes. So a little bit about the school. We're lucky enough that we have fiber coming to the school, and we're at the 1 gig. So we have blazing speed for internet, which is great because we are one-to-one with computers, and so having about 160 computers hooked up to the internet at one time can really bog it down. But with 1 gig, we're able to access a lot of different pieces of technology at once, and so students aren't waiting with the spinning, sometimes they call it the circle of death, which all of you have experienced on the computers that just sit there and wait and spin and spin. We don't get that. Actually, we have some internal issues. We have some copper wire that connects 2 servers, and that's now become the thing that's slowing us down internally. So with education, the internet's it's a wonderful thing, and having students have access to that at school is important. It's also something that we are very careful about. We still embrace the outdoors and get the kids away from the internet and screens because that's a great thing. But if you look around the country and around the world, students are accessing the internet and mass amounts of information. An example of this is that we are falling behind when you compare to even Africa, because Africa, they didn't have anything, but they are upgrading now to the latest and greatest, where we have some of those copper lines still left and some of the old technology. So students in Africa are accessing the internet at speeds higher than the United States and even in the Northwoods here of Wisconsin. We have to remember that it's a global economy now, so we are competing against not only our region, not only the country, but students from India, from Africa, from China, and we want our students to have that same opportunity. So one thing that is important is that they have that access at home too. Right now, we are moving away from textbooks. And textbooks, so your traditional textbook, you may keep 5 to 10 years. Well, as soon as you get that textbook, it's outdated. And so what we're moving to is called the tech books. And those are all cloud-based on the internet and updated monthly. So they never are out of date. They're also considerably cheaper than a textbook. And embedded in them are videos, PDFs, connection to other places. And so at school, we can access those tech books and get everything we need at once. If we assign something at home on the tech book and the student doesn't have access to high-speed internet, that tech book becomes inaccessible. And so that means that that student can't go beyond the classroom, that they have to wait until they come to school to access a piece of information. And that's an important thing. Students, we can find examples of students that have gone beyond the classroom and even invented things that all because they found information on the internet. I mean, MIT has their entire course on the internet right now. So a student from North Lakeland could go on to MIT's courses and figure out something. And there's stories, not necessarily North Lakeland students, but of students inventing something that helps detect pancreatic cancer because they figured it out on the internet. And that's something that's extremely important to our students, that they have that same access as students that are in cities, that students are in other countries. And that's becoming an increasingly large problem in this area. Snow days, this winter was an excellent winter for snow, not necessarily for snow days for the school. There's a push for, in some communities, to be able to have a snow day that's still a school day. Sounds great in theory, but if we assign something and say, do this at home, if a student does not have high-speed internet or internet at all, that puts them behind. And in some cases, some schools were opening their doors during snow days so students could come to the school, which defeats the purpose of having the snow days, because they were driving on the roads that we didn't want the buses to be on, or they'd come to a local library. And so not having internet at home puts them behind, and it's an equity issue for those students that are competing against other students that have the internet at their home compared to students that don't. And it's a very important, very big deal in this area for our students. I can tell you from a school perspective is that we have lost some families that want to move to this area. This area is we offer everything that any family could ever want. A good school, beautiful lakes, activities, but these families, a lot of them work from home. And if they don't have high-speed internet, they can't work there, so then they have to find another community that maybe isn't their top choice, but it has something that keeps their livelihood going. So we have lost families to areas like Minocqua or other places that there's many more choices that the speeds at the house that they're looking at are available. And so it's an important issue, one, for keeping the number of students at school, but also a bigger thing is just having students have access to the information and the available pieces of their education at home and at school that puts them at the level playing field, and I would say above, because of the other things that we offer to other students in other places like Chicago, Milwaukee, Twin Cities, anything like that. So it's an important issue here educationally for our students and families.
Thank you, Brent. Much better portrayal than I think what the three of us could have done. Thank you for coming. So the last area is telemedicine. And this is an area that's increasing at an exponential rate. So what you will see today and in the future is we may not have to go to a clinic to be diagnosed with something. That diagnosis will be done either in our home or in a location, maybe in a public building, where we interact with a medical professional via video. And there's some diagnostic equipment there where the doctor can have us put either a stethoscope on or perhaps do some other sampling. Doctor sees that in real time and then can make a diagnosis. This area is going to revolutionize the way diagnoses are done and the way treatment is done. And at the end of the day, you know, when you look around, especially at the demographics of Boulder Junction, it's really important for all of us because it keeps us in our homes longer. It allows us to not have to travel back and forth to appointments. Many, many, many benefits. What's the hook? The hook is we need to have adequate internet connection speeds in our homes. That's the hook. I mentioned that Boulder Junction isn't first. We have some local communities who have been pioneers. Land O'Lakes is finishing up a fiber optic project in the majority of its township, and they are promoting themselves on their internet, and they also have ads on television now. Bayfield County may have been first in the state, especially in rural areas, and they looked at it more from a county perspective. And as you can see, they are marketing themselves as the place to be. There is a bit of competition that goes on here. You don't have to be first. And we, Boulder Junction, have the opportunity to look at these other communities, figure out what they did well and what they could have done better, and then replicate that to make it as best as what we can for Boulder Junction. Here's some interesting stats. Everybody knows Amazon. They're this generation's Walmart, you know, they sell everywhere. It's amazing how big they've gotten so quickly. Wisconsin is in Amazon's top 10 for small business sellers. It is newsworthy when Wisconsin gets in the top 10 in anything. But on the other hand, we're 36th in the nation in broadband. How that happened, who knows? There's some catch up that Wisconsin needs to do. When you look at our neighbors just to our west in Minnesota, they're really far ahead of us, and there are a lot of reasons for that. And again, you don't have to be first, but you have to be as best. But there's plenty of opportunity. What's our current broadband situation in the township? We're going to go through a number of pieces of information and take you through some maps. We have approximately 1,800 parcels in the township of Boulder Junction. That might seem kind of low. Well, one of the reasons it's low is 87% of the property is owned by the state of Wisconsin. So we're fortunate, and Brent, this goes to your point, we're fortunate because we've got a lot of forest here. It's a pretty cool place to be. We're not sure how many residents and businesses can be covered by 25 meg. We think it's 20% or less. It's a fairly small area. Here are our current providers, probably led by CenturyLink, which is a bit of a holdover from the past when telecommunications was regulated. Well, it's been deregulated for quite some time, but these big telecommunications providers don't really like to go into each other's territory. So CenturyLink is here. We have a cable offering that's been here for, in cable TV, probably 30 years or so. HughesNet and Viasat, these are satellite providers. And it doesn't seem like the distribution is particularly high, but they're still a service offering. And then we have the Verizon, and it's usually Verizon, but it could be AT&T, but I think most folks use Verizon. When you stand back and look at that, we're really not well covered, especially where we need to be today. And as Brent has told us, some of the students, maybe it's half, just can't perform their education and go to the e-textbooks when they're at home. Boulder Junction is fortunate in a lot of ways. One of the ways that it's fortunate is CenturyLink, over the last few years, has invested half $2. This is government funding that was provided, I think, going back to about 2013 or 2014. And they invested money in the township of Boulder Junction. So in some ways, our service is better than some other townships. And remember the first question I asked, nobody put up their hand, so you could live in another place that's worse. So just keep that in mind. CenturyLink wouldn't give us their fiber deployment, so we had to go out and find it. We think we're somewhere in the neighborhood of 50 to 80%. And I want to go through some of these maps with you, and I know it's hard to see, but I'll kind of point out what's what. This is the business district of Boulder Junction, and they have an office. This is where all of their technology is deployed, and it's by the local tower in town. They have fiber that goes up County Highway M, and then goes out on High Fish Trap Lake, and then deploys somewhat in the area just to the southwest of Fish Trap Lake. This symbol indicates one of those nodes. And the photo that I showed you with that white box, that's a node. That's where the fiber comes, and then it does this conversion or transfer to the copper infrastructure. So that's one segment. The other segment in the dotted line is, that's where we think it is. But the other segment is up by Dairyman's, down M, and then off toward High Lake. And then this is the other end of High Lake, and it terminates almost between Fish Trap, Rush, and High Lakes on High Pines Lane. There's another node there. So these nodes really do enhance the service. One of the problems is there aren't enough of them. Okay? And then the other problem is it still uses the existing copper, and some of that copper could be 50 years old, that goes to your home. So you just see the potential degradation. It's cheaper, and this is the reprime. You might be thinking, well, why? Why did they do this? It's because it's cheaper than planting fiber to everybody's home. This is to the west of Boulder Junction, again, the CenturyLink office. Let's just go south here along County Highway M. This is North Creek Road, where there are a couple of nodes, and then out on White Sand Lake. Down County Highway H. There might be a gap here, we're not sure. There's a node, this would be Jag Lake, Street Lake in here. There's another node here. This is North Creek Road, a couple of nodes. And then out toward Highway 51 where there are a couple of nodes. And then this is interesting, this is Highway K. There's a road called Bear Lake Road. Fiber, not really sure, but it goes like 3 miles north on Bear Lake Road. Not really sure where it goes, but it's out there.
Can you go back to the last one?
Sure.
I see that there's a gap from where the node is up off of K.
Yes.
I assume that the school is up there by that lake because it's got fiber optic, or am I wrong?
And you're right about that. So the school is in the township of Manitowish, and I believe there's one node between the school and where this terminates.
Okay.
But we think that that fiber in a backbone, so the backbone does run along Highway K to feed to Boulder Junction. And Steve, I think you said that you may have found some more information.
Bill, can I just say something?
Go ahead, Dennis.
I just want to thank Bill Nemeth, because as he's indicated, we cannot obtain the map of the existing fiber location from the provider. Bill Nemeth went out on his own time and drove the roads, looking for the those big white poles with the orange caps on them, and the nodes. So he has spent countless hours doing this on his own in order to put together this information. And I, frankly, I say thank you.
But they've done a lot of road driving around here, so it's all right.
Bill, and I can tell you that they did extend the fiber past school. How far, I have no idea, but because we were the termination point for it coming from Mattress Waters, and when they did the big upgrade, they did extend it past, and the reason I know that is because they accidentally cut our fiber for a day.
That's what you told us.
Yeah, so, but I know it does go past. How far, I don't know.
What we've been able to map, I think if I have this right, it's Fallon
Fallon
Road,
Road,
yeah. So we're still kind of guessing, we shouldn't have to be in that game. Let's take a look at one more, and then I have some other maps to show. But, so this is kind of the southwest quadrant of Boulder Junction, if you will. Trout Lake, this is County Highway N, this is Highway 51. Frontier Communications has their backbone that does go through the township of Boulder Junction along Highway 51. So they do run through the township. It is a backbone, so it's kind of like a super highway for their fiber optic network, their communications network. The black, turning to the black, this is County Highway H. There is a node right just south of Harmony Point on Upper Gresham, coming down Highway 51, and then it goes into the Trout Lake Station. It's probably fiber going right in there. Camp Manitowish has fiber going to it, and Dairyman's has fiber going to it. They paid to have that infrastructure put in, and then, and then they pay their monthly. And then this is coming down Highway M, and it terminates somewhere between the two trots. So that's what we have for existing CenturyLink infrastructure in the town, or something like that. Let's talk about strategy for a moment. So the work group, you know how these projects go is you kind of start off, everything, all these balloons are in the air, and then you have to start wrapping your arms around the balloons. And we wrap our arms around the balloons by developing a strategy. That's really our philosophy on how we're going to run the project. First off, developing objectives. Where do we want to get? And some of that is a little bit pie in the sky, but we wanted to really concentrate on our working objectives. Determine our best options and providers. We're in the middle of that right now. Designing an expansion plan, that kind of goes with the prior about the providers, because there are some options here, and we got to consider those options. Securing community support, that's one of the things that these public information sessions are about. This is the first of others we'll have. Creating and leveraging relationships with suppliers. This is a challenging one with large companies. It's not like we have a representative, like an account executive, who is assigned to Boulder Junction. It doesn't work that way. But through Steve's help, we have been able to get a contact with CenturyLink that's helped our residents, their subscribers. It is easier to do it with smaller organizations. I'm going to talk more about grants. What do you do then? You start executing projects and then being able to market Boulder Junction as a high-speed broadband community and a best place to live. It's really where the ultimate goal is. Here are working objectives. There are two. I want to keep it as simple as possible. The first one is 1 gigabit of service in what I'm referring to as 3BD, Boulder Broadband Business District. This would be the downtown area. where potential businesses may go to lease space. And this 1 gig or more or greater is what they need. And it's essential that we be in a position to be able to market Boulder Junction for that type of service. Okay, so that's that. The 25 meg. This is 25 meg or greater. And that's kind of the key, because if we build for today, we're underbuilding. And when we do a project, we've got to be thinking about the future. And this area, as we've seen, is galloping along very quickly, and we need to be there. However, when we look at our current situation, if we could today offer everybody 25, we're doing a lot of work. And it's really to lead, I'll go back to you, Jim. It's really to lead everyone to this decent internet service. Jim?
It's a simple question. Are both of those classifications symmetrical speeds up and down?
They can be with fiber, yes. So the businesses, so what Jim asked is, are they symmetrical? So it's the same down and up. This one absolutely has to be. Now, it wouldn't have to be 1 gig, so if a business wanted 100 by 100, they will be able to get it. This one, there are options, and depending upon what supplier, they have different options. But this is why I think when we really tune in on this, we need to be looking at fiber, because it is really the only technology today that is offering that symmetrical up and down. Thank you. All right, we're going to go through a number of maps. I'll go through them quickly just to kind of point out where everything is. You'll be able to identify your own property, but these are our target areas. Boulder Junction is divided into 5 quadrants. This is the northeast quadrant. And what's interesting, when we went through this, is to really understand the population density of the township of Boulder Junction. It's quite interesting. All right. So this is Boulder Lake. This area here is kind of the business district of Boulder Junction. And the parcels, the target parcels, are highlighted in pink. So this is the area around Boulder Lake. To the northeast, this is Oswego. This is Fish Trap. This is the southern part of High Lake and the western part of High Lake. This is County Highway M. A couple of properties there. And then we go west around Little Crooked Lake. We have the south side, or excuse me, the west side of the Manitowish River and back over. So you really see kind of the core of our area. And there are 509 properties represented in this quadrant. The next most densely populated quadrant is the southeast. And the southeast this is the southern part of the business district in Boulder Junction, North Trout, White Sand Lake, Lost Canoe. Over here, County Highway H coming down. This is Street Elizabeth out here, and then some properties to the north on H and K. Boulder Junction West, Highway 51. One surprise here was the amount of properties around wild rice. Boy, that just kind of jumped off at the map. And these folks, I don't know, does anybody live out there in wild rice this has to be significantly underserved today? And we go up to the top, that's Island Lake, I guess the West Business District of Boulder Junction, and a few smattering of properties. I would say those are our three core areas of concentration. And as you can see, you know, they're not geographically close to each other. That's one of the other challenges. Northwest, Whitney, Island, the rest of Island, Clear Lake, quite a few properties there, and then Big Lake, which may be the least served area within the township of Boulder Junction, just next to non-existent service. Mid-South, that's really about on the upper left-hand corner, the Greshams, and then we've got Muskellonge, a couple of properties here. Deep South, you probably didn't think that we had a Deep South in Boulder Junction, but we do. It doesn't snow here in January, by the way.
It does too.
So we've got the southeast corner of Trout, and then we have, what is this, Man Lake, and then Little John. So that's our distribution, and when we look at it from a target area perspective, those parcels add up to over 1,300. So if you think about, we have 1,800 parcels, we're still missing quite a few, and not quite sure where all those are, but a lot of them may be 40s or 80s or 160s that people own. Grants. We're almost ready to go to our feedback session. There are a lot of grants in this area. There's no question about it. The one that's circled at the top is the Wisconsin Public Service Commission. They've administered grants since 2015, 2016. In the next budget cycle, so 2020, 2021, the funding moves from about 14, 15 million up to 44 million. So now's the time communities are really going to make significant advancement in this area. There's a lot more funding available. Beyond that, it becomes kind of an alphabet soup of federal agencies that provide funding, grant funding. The U.S. Department of Agriculture is the next kind of big piece through their Rural Connect grant program. There's not a lot of information about it yet, but that seems to be that next pot of money. Going through the rest of these, I think you get the idea. There's a lot out there. We can't discount telehealth and then foundation grants. And we've had some conversations with some of the foundations already, and you know, the response has been pretty good. So that's an area that we really can look harder at. But you get the idea, there is a lot of money out there. It's a matter of making those connections, figuring out what you need to do, and then going out aggressively, making the case, and getting that money. Next steps. We're close to issuing a scope of work to providers to get proposals, to understand what we want to do, how much is that going to cost. And it's probably already thinking about this. I showed you a lot about CenturyLink. There are designated telco provider. They've invested our funds, because let's remember, all those CAF funds are all tax dollars, into the township of Boulder Junction. They kind of have, in some ways, a step ahead of other provider who might come in here. But nonetheless, we need to look at the market and make the best directional decision for the township. Once we receive those proposals, obviously we have to go through a review process. There's going to be additional public information meetings, and then we want to be to a position where we present a recommended solution, and there may be some options there to you and the town board. Funding, applying for grants, and then executing those projects.
Are there any timelines on any of these steps?
Oh, yes, there are. Let's talk about the PSC grants. So the question was, are there timelines? The budget was approved and finalized almost on time. This is a Wisconsin state budget. There's been a bit of a delay, I would say, with the PSC, but they're telling us that the grant funding should be available, and there's a whole process, in the September timeframe with the application deadline by the end of the year. If we want to take advantage of that program, and we've made some good inroads there already, that's our timeline. But there's another timeline with the town board and the whole budgeting process if we want to start doing something in 2020. So there are some timelines. Time is of the essence in a number of areas, one of which is the ability to market Boulder Junction. The second one of which is if we want to apply for those grants and have the opportunity to get that grant funding in 2020, we can't delay. So that's kind of the timeline. All right, so what do we need from you? The first thing is feedback. And we're going to open it up here. We're right on schedule. We're going to open it up to you and get your feedback, no matter what that is. Technology, likes, dislikes, whatever you want to give us, we want to listen. That's what these sessions are for. And then, well, what are we looking for? Your support. An agreement that providing this type of broadband service to the Township of Boulder Junction is the right direction, and we need to commit to it for a bunch of reasons we're already talked about, and that's going to result in a more robust Boulder Junction. And a couple of things to think about. Improved and sustained property values. And as the economy goes up and down, the property values go up and down. Maybe, we have a couple of realtors in here can probably tell us, if it's more than what other areas experience. And then the next piece is, and I thought about this the other night. So my wife Sue and I came here from a township northwest of Appleton 4 years ago. We've been full-time 4 years ago. And that township had a kind of a separate industrial park for light industry. Well, one of the benefits, and this is a farming community that's been kind of transitioned to a bedroom community, but that industrial park with those businesses leveled that tax base. And from the time we moved there to the time we moved away, it was 22 years, our property taxes did not go up that much in that period of time. That's what businesses can do to a community. And it wasn't a negative thing. These are eco-friendly businesses, but that's what the township marketed to. And then, depending upon how this shakes out, it'll probably be some type of electors issue in November. Your turn. Do the honors, sir.
I want to ask a question. On the
Loud?
PSC, the public service grants,
Yes.
is that like 100% from the PSC bill?
It's generally 50%. So there's 50% by the PSC, and then there's a 50% cost share. And there are all these other grant opportunities. So theoretically, if a community wanted to apply for all these other grants, it could potentially not have any direct financial commitment. I say that theoretically because most communities we've looked at, they've only gone after PSC because it's Wisconsin and the process is really easy. A lot of these grant things can be pretty complicated. PSC makes it easy. They want communities to grow. And that's the only thing a lot of communities have done.
Is that your concern?
concern as far as any resistance to this, that there'd be a financial commitment from the community and people might not want to do that? Is that your main concern?
Yeah, I mean, we want to be sensitive to any costs. It doesn't matter if you're running a township or a business, certainly want to be sensitive to that. Where we're at right now is we don't know how much this is going to cost. That's the first step, is how much is this going to cost? We need input from suppliers to tell us, and then we can come to really the C-suite, if you will, the decision makers, and say, this is what it is. What do you think? But it is a sensitive point. Jim, I think you're next.
So, applying for a grant, you need to know basically how much you may need. So, has any studies been done? Have you gone out to CenturyLink and asked them, what they project would be necessary to cover a certain area, whatever that area may be? What's the history on putting together the numbers so that you can reach out and ask for a grant that actually covers it? And so that's my first question.
Yeah, so the question is, have we engaged CenturyLink on what they think it's going to cost? We have, just very informally, and that's why we're going through this RFP process to get something that's concrete in our hands. And our understanding of the process, we're not a business, we're a township, we've got to open that up a bit broader to be fair to other providers. But we're in the process of doing that right now.
Can I do a follow-up question?
Absolutely. You have the mic. You're not using it.
Don't need it. So in laying cable and fiber optics, you talked about the future and what may entail. So in being able to lay this line, I'll throw up just some numbers. Say we put in a 1-inch cable. Is somewhere within the next 5 years we're going to need to put in a 2-inch cable.
And that's an important aspect, Jim. We got to make sure that this thing is built to sustain the use that it's going to have. Now, what CenturyLink has told us is the stuff that they planted in the ground here back in 16, 17 is sufficient enough to do whatever we need to do. So we're going by their word a bit. Other providers have told us that they overbuild and over-engineer. It costs money to over-engineer, there's no question about it. But it seems like people understand this enough where they don't underbuild. That's you're spot on.
And there's equipment on either end of it that they can deploy that increases the speed of the fiber. So the fiber itself, I was told, has virtually unlimited capacity. It just depends on what equipment they put in.
And you're right, Steve, it is, but I think where Jim was going is if they're putting in, let's say, 32-strand fiber, and 5-year requirement really requires 64-strand fiber, then you got to trench it. We don't want to get in that situation. Let's see, did we cover everybody? Laura, I think you were next, sir. We'll get back to you.
Just wondering if, just wondering, is this going to be done in phases for different areas over a period of 3 to 5 years or something like that, or what are the plans there?
Yeah, that's going to be, we need some input. So the question was, is this going to be done in phases? And to answer your question, yeah, I think it will be. Now, we need to get that input from the suppliers. So what can they do? What resources do they have? And then the other question is what kind of funding will require that? But most other communities that do this, especially communities our size, do it in multi-phases, multi-years. We had one in back, Dennis.
I just want to, when we put in our fiber at Dairyman's, we didn't use CenturyLink. We brought in our own company, connected from our business office 4,000 feet and took it out as close as we could to their spot. And then they brought the rest, because they sub it out, their company doesn't do it anyhow. So when we put ours in, we put in a big conduit that we ran the fiber through in case down the road we needed to improve that fiber, we could easily pull a new line through it. So I just wanted to let you know.
That was really smart, really smart. That's usually not the way it's done in rural areas, but that's interesting that you, now, can I have a follow-up question? Sorry about that.
Sorry.
So when you put that in, was that 4,000 feet on Dairyman's property?
Yes, it was.
Okay, and then you went to the easement area and then they connected?
Correct.
Okay, got it, good, thank you.
There's a certain distance CenturyLink charges, their rate goes up on a distance. So if you find that distance amount, we brought ours out as into that distance, so then our rate of them laying the rest of that dropped significantly.
Yeah, and it was probably much more economic for you to do that, yes.
Correct.
Okay, all right. We've heard that.
So if we're in a place where, okay, and this is more for you probably, what are we talking about costs? Like if you're in an area where say there's 12 houses, if the business can put it in, obviously you put it in because it's gonna improve your business. But if we wanted to put it in there, what are we talking about to get it to the CenturyLink part where we're still gonna have to pay CenturyLink a bit, but we're not gonna have to pay? I guess I'm looking at what's the cost?
Yeah, the specifics, and so we'll share with you the costs that we've been told for laying fiber. That can range from anywhere, we've heard as low as 10,000 a mile, to 40,000 a mile, up to, we've been told one situation was $1 million for about a mile. Well, when you think about all the various things that you have to go through in all the various areas, rock, and where you don't have aerial lines, just imagine how much directional boring is required. It kind of depends, and it depends upon, as you found out, who's doing it. Big companies, look, big companies, their profit requirements are 35 to 50% or even more. Smaller companies can live with 5 to 15% gross profit. Big companies have overheads, smaller companies have smaller overheads. So that's why it's all over the place. I don't think that answers your question, but I don't think we can. Steve, do you have any?
No, I know that CenturyLink has said that they will pitch in on it, so they will be something less than what they always quote. There's also a difference between the line that runs from whatever the distribution piece of equipment is to your house, as opposed to a main line that runs and is servicing a bunch of homes. So it's $1 to $2 a foot to get it from the line to your house, whereas when you're burying the other cable, it's $10 a foot, or whatever the case may be. So it really kind of depends.
Yeah, and that's really a good point. And then the other piece I should mention is most of the providers will, let's say you're within 250 feet of the main line, they'll do that for free just for hooking you up. So, we got, that's the detail that we need to get. Let's go to Laura and then Jim.
We have a friend that used to work for an installing company for fiber. They weren't CenturyLink or a big company like that. Are you going to be looking at that type of provider as well as CenturyLink for the installation, or for laying most of it and then hooking up to CenturyLink?
That wasn't our plan, because when you start subbing out those projects, if that's something that we think makes sense, and we got to figure out how to administer that.
How to manage it?
Yeah, I mean, it creates more complexity. You can save money, but it creates more complexity. I mean, it is something to think about.
So, one thing with yours, as far as subbing it out, you have to remember that the easements are written for a certain company, and for other companies to jump in there, they have to go ahead and cover themselves with easements too.
Okay.
The question I have for you is, in your process and so forth, certainly you looked out at other wheels. How did Land O'Lakes do it? Tell us about Land O'Lakes. And how long did it take?
Okay, so how did Land O'Lakes do it? They were in a bit different situation than Boulder Junction. They were served by Frontier, but they were getting next to no internet service from them. So they looked at it and said, we need to do something. You know, pioneers, which is good for them. And then and we're not quite sure exactly how it all sorted out, but they did not go with Frontier. They went with a company, and this is public information, they went with a Eagle River-based company called ChoiceTel. And ChoiceTel plowed fiber from their connection point, Eagle River, all the way up Highway 45 to Land O'Lakes. And then they deployed it from there. So that was how they did it, and then 4 years. So they're finishing up their project now, and they were successful in getting grant funding. You know, we can only speculate on why they were so successful in getting grant funding. Maybe it was the fact ChoiceTel is a U.S. or a Wisconsin-based company. You don't know, but they were very successful. And the other thing, so just to kind of level set here, what was interesting is Land O'Lakes told us that their take rate, so their subscribers that went to them, is 85%, which is mind-boggling. Usually it's going to be 50% or less. All right.
So Bill, do you know, you say they were very successful with the grant funding, did they still have to pay any tax dollars?
They did, and we're not aware that they went out for any additional grant funding. It was a 50-50 cost share. So 50% from the grant and then 50% from the community investment.
Do we know how much?
That question came up on Tuesday night as well. The first piece of funding was about a $500,000 project. And then, what did they tell us? What did they have in it? Jim, do you remember?
They had about $500,000 in town dollars.
Yeah.
So it's probably $1 million project.
Right, we have the numbers.
Let me take that a little bit further. That first year was critical because they had 18 or 20 miles of fiber that they had to bring up a major highway. That was a big cost. Yes, sir.
The funding, is that on a first-come basis from the state?
It's not. So what they do is they have a board who reviews these grant applications, and then they select the ones that they think can be or will be most successful. Now, what we were told by the director of the broadband group there was, if you can demonstrate community support and partnerships, you're going to be most successful. And that is absolutely key. So if we get to the point where we are going to submit these grant requests, everybody and anybody who's going to support this project, we need to get letters, testimonials, anything, because that's going to help our case. They want these things to be successful. And I showed Bayfield County. Bayfield County was incredibly successful with their projects for the entire county. Well, that's how they did it. And the PSC just loved it.
I live in a spot where CenturyTel does not offer us internet at this point because of the infrastructure requirements that they would have to do. Would we be included in what they would allow fiber to do?
Do you know how far from a fiber line you are, Paul?
I can't imagine that it's more than about a mile and a half
Less
to the
than a
Fish
mile.
Track Road fiber line.
Less than a mile from the hotspot.
Yeah, less than a mile.
Yeah.
Then we're gonna need to take a look at that and look at the distribution. We're talking a lot about fiber. There are some other technologies that can provide spot coverage that might be a little bit cheaper. Can't really answer, but we really wanna be able to serve everybody.
Well, I'm one of those satellite users now, and I'll be honest with you, the satellite at 25 up and 25 down, I tried to download a TV program that we bought off of our, buy an old program that you wanna catch up with things. It was running at 1.3, and as long as I let it buffer for 20 minutes before I started watching, it would buffer as fast as I watched an hour-long TV show. And that's pretty sad for satellite. For what it cost me for satellite, that's really sad.
And your story is a very common one, but right now, that's your only option.
It is.
Which is, it shouldn't be like that. Did you have a question?
Just to back up a sec, who did you say did Land Lakes?
There's a company called ChoiceTel.
ChoiceTel.
Yeah, they're at choicetel.net.
Okay, thank you.
Okay,
So,
what else? Go ahead.
I wanna know what we can do, besides supporting you.
Yep.
Besides making sure that our board members know, and we're on Little John here.
You're on Little John,
We're about
okay.
as freaking far away as from Boulder as we could get.
Yeah.
So, but, in writing letters and all that, keeping up to date on what's going, I have somebody that lives by me that wants to telecommute. They're in Weston, they wanna move up here.
If they can.
But can't,
Yeah.
she needs a dedicated, secure line in order to do that.
Yeah.
So what can we do?
Yeah, so I'm really gonna go back to the next steps. There's
Okay,
a process
all right.
as a township that we need to follow
Okay.
here to make sure that we're doing everything right and it's legal, and we're gonna do that. But it's your support, and whatever that looks like in the next 3 to 4 weeks, we're gonna have some clarity on what this is gonna cost. And then if it's a recommendation or one option, we're gonna come to the town board, we're gonna come to you as electors and say, here is what it is. Let's vote on it, let's support this and support the future of Boulder Junction. That's really where we need to go. Cause
Really
talk
talk to everybody you know.
Exactly.
Right, obviously talk to the town board, but talk to all of your neighbors, anybody that you know that lives in Boulder. Let them know you're for it.
Yeah, and I think at least what we've been hearing, we don't have a lot of data, we're hearing a lot of things. That situation with the telecommuting is repeated over and over and over again. Jim. Go ahead, Jim.
Well, what you've seen here is, thanks to this work group, is a properly constructed project plan with the beginnings of effective project management. You've raised a lot of questions that can't be answered at this point, but they have a plan for getting those answers, and they have a plan for seeking funds. So congratulations to them for what they've done.
Yes, awesome.
Secondly, this town board, as all town boards, are faced with many demands about people wanting money spent in certain categories or for certain needs. It comes down to priorities. This town board needs to hear from people who support this. You need to enable us to make the right decision.
All right, thank you, Jim. All right, anybody have a last question when we close this out?
Do you have those maps here to look at as far as the coverage?
Online.
They're gonna be online, as soon as we're finished up here, I'm gonna go over to the town office and figure out how we
There's
can
some
get it
areas that
online.
were cut off.
If I can do them.
Yeah, the resolution cut this off for some reason. But we'll get that fixed. Anybody else before we close? Yes?
So, I'm kind of curious, is this just happening town by town and not county
about Bayfield County.
Yeah.
Because I guess I'm at the wrong meeting. I come to Boulder for everything. I use your library, we eat here, we shop here, we get gas here. We're not technically Boulder. We're on K, past White Sand. So we are in the dead zone between Sainer and Boulder, and clearly your map doesn't include us. So maybe we're gonna have to do what this gentleman back here did, and when you get your lines laid, we're gonna have to pay to say, please come to our house. But anyway, so probably we're not helpful, but we're in the dead zone.
Yeah, and we're very familiar with that dead zone. There might be a solution for a fixed wireless to cover that area. That might be your best, at least short-term solution. To answer your question, at least we're not aware in Vilas County that there's a county effort to do this. So I guess Land O'Lakes got started. We're there. We're doing it from a township perspective because, look, we've got to, be concerned about the township of Boulder Junction. So,
Right.
if we can help through our provider contacts, we're already having some conversations with others out that way. We'll do what we can. Okay. All right. We're almost at the top of the hour. It's lunchtime, so thank you for coming, and be safe.
Thank you.